going to get started here in the interest of time, if everyone can grab a seat. Is the production crew ready? We're good. Welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Tammy Riley. I'm the Executive Director of GNAT TV. Thank you all for coming for this really important discussion. I want to welcome all of you here and say hello to everyone who's watching on our cable channels and online. Just a housekeeping, remember to turn your phone off, please. I want to start by giving some thank yous. I have 1 minute of remarks, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Andrew. I want to thank the Manchester Community Library for being a wonderful partner and making space available for us tonight. I want to thank GNAT TV's business underwriters who financially support us and enable us to do this essential community work. And of course, I want to thank the dedicated staff that's here in the room and my board of directors who work really hard every day to keep GNAT TV going. You're here today because you care about community. We all care about community, and GNAT TV's mission is to connect community and to empower people. And we do that through fostering free speech, through being the guardian of government transparency. We're a trusted source of local information. Please check out our website and our wonderful community calendar to stay connected with your friends and neighbors. And finally, we're an essential provider of media education for our youth. As many of you know, our funding is derived from cable television, and as consumers cut the cord with cable, our funding is diminished. Tonight, I'm asking for your help in preserving and protecting GNAT TV so that we can continue to serve the community and offer wonderful civic engagement programs like tonight. I urge you to become more involved with us. You can volunteer your time. You can learn how to run a camera. You can serve on our board of directors. You can throw a fundraiser event. And you can share the content with your friends and neighbors on all the socials. And if you can, please consider a donation. A donation in any amount is impactful to this organization. We can do a lot with a little. So I appreciate your consideration. And I want to thank you again for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Andrew McKeever, who's going to moderate this evening. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Tammy. And thank you to everyone who's come here tonight. This is, I think, going to be a very interesting and informative conversation for all of us. Well, I'm sure we'll walk away learning more than we know at the moment about all the candidates here and where they stand on some of the issues that are important to all of us. I'm just going to run through real quickly what our format's going to be and what some of the ground rules are, so you know what to expect. We're going to start off by having each one of the 6 candidates give a 2-minute long opening statement. I mean, it doesn't have to be 2 minutes. It could be 30 seconds if they want, but 2 minutes max. We have a timekeeper in the back of the room. He may be the most important person in the room because we want to try and get to cover as much ground as possible before 9 o'clock when we are going to have to pull the plug. So we'll start off the opening statements. We'll go down the table and they'll get to introduce themselves to you. Then we're going to go to 2 questions from me. They were inspired by or suggested by some of the questions that we got online prior to this evening. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer those 2 questions. There won't be any rebuttals, however, just in the interest of kind of moving things along. Following those 2 questions, we're going to turn the microphone over to you folks in the audience. And you'll get to ask questions, or a question, I should say. When we get to that point, please do just ask a question, okay? It's not the time for a 5-minute speech. So at a certain point, depending on how that section goes, we may come back to me for another question or two just to close things out, or we may go straight to the final piece of the evening, which is a closing statement of 1 minute from each one of the candidates. So that's how we're going to try to work it anyway. Let me just quickly introduce them all to you. I know probably most of you already know them, but just in case, going from, let's see, it would be your left, way down at the far end there, we have Lawrence Spike Whitmire from Shasbury. Next to him is Rob Plunkett from Bennington. And next to him, Seth Bongartz from Manchester. Then Cynthia Browning from Arlington. Steve Berry from Manchester. And Joe Jervis from Arlington. And before we get started and have the candidates get us started with their opening statements, I just want to say it's not easy running for public office. It's a real strong, difficult effort. There's a lot involved in it. It takes a tremendous amount of time and effort. And I think just before we get started, why don't we have a round of applause for all of the candidates. Thank you all for stepping up and providing your leadership to our county. The 6 candidates will eventually, 2 will wind up being in the state senate in Montpelier to represent Bennington County. It's the first time in quite a long time that there have been 2 open seats in the state senate from Bennington County, so I think it makes for a very interesting evening. Okay, let me be quiet, and we drew some straws at the start, and Rob Plunkett is the lucky winner who gets to go first in his opening statement. Then we're going to go just sort of down the table. Seth, you'll be on deck, and Cynthia, Steve, Joe, and then back to Spike. And we're going to reverse that order then. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting confused. Spike gets the microphone to start us.
Spike's using the microphone now?
Yeah.
I thought it was Joe. But Spike's closer.
He's going to get to give us the opening statement. We'll go through that.
Okay.
You're going to be the first responder. I'm sorry. I'm already getting confused. Oh my God. We haven't even started yet. Okay. Spike Whitmire, 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you. Well, good evening to those in the audience and at home. I am Spike Whitmire. I spent my entire adult life serving the community, working with the poor and homeless, working with area teens in Bennington, volunteering with the Department of Corrections, helping recently released inmates get back into society. And now I'd like to represent you as your next state senator. People all over this district are being squeezed by inflation. They're being crippled by higher property taxes, choked by government allowed increases to electric rates, health insurance premiums, and DMV fees, just to name a few. To date, state government has done very little to ease the burden on everyday Vermonters. In fact, in most cases, they've made it worse. Party politics and political agendas have squeezed the life out of everyday Vermonters, and this has got to stop. And the only way to do this, I feel, is to elect a new breed of elected officials that won't push political agendas, but will put the will and the welfare of the people first. Leaders who will push Vermont forward, but at a pace we can all afford. Leaders who will look at problems and find practical, fiscally responsible solutions, not just spend money and hope those problems go away. While this has been going on, everyday Vermonters have been crying out, but their voices have not been heard. Politicians get elected and then usually plug their ears and do what they want in Montpelier and let the people find out when their tax bill comes and their electric bill is raised. If elected, I will restore the voice of the people by posting on my website what is being debated and what is being voted on every week. And on that website, you'll have, everyday Vermonters will have a chance to respond to that and tell me how they feel about things. And then I can go and represent them accurately. The last 5 years, every Vermonter has had to tighten their belt financially, and the government needs to as well.
Spike, I'm going to have
Thank
you stop there.
I was done.
You'll have more opportunities to finish that thought.
I was done, yeah.
Okay, Rob Plunkett.
And thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Tammy, wherever you went. Thank you, GNAT. And thank you, everybody that's here and everyone that's watching. So I've been involved in one of these forums before, and I know everyone here and myself, we want to really get down to what the questions are and what the issues are. No one really wants to listen to a politician just kind of talk about themselves for a while. So I'm not going to. So you know my name's Rob Plunkett. I'm from Bennington, and I'm a prosecutor. But there are two things that I want to talk about that I don't think will come up for the rest of the night that I think are really important for the Senate race. As Andrew had mentioned, this is a different type of race, and it's a different type of race because we lost two senators that had been powerhouses. And Brian wanted to retire, and I know why, and it's a wonderful reason. But we lost Dick Sears tragically and suddenly. And so we're here now trying to pick two more. What was true about Brian and Dick, though, was that they were both from Bennington. And that was important to me. And I'm from Bennington. Lived almost all of my life in Bennington. I've seen the town grow and change. It hasn't been very long, but it's about 4 decades. And so I have that experience with the town of Bennington that we've lost that was in Montpelier. And I know, I'm in Manchester, so why does anyone care that I'm from Bennington? And most of GNAT's probably from the North Shire as well. But I'd see someone who cares, but that's sort of the point, because I'm running a campaign with Seth Bongartz. Seth Bongartz is from Manchester. Seth Bongartz knows Manchester, and we're a team. And we need a team from the North Shire and the South Shire to represent us in the Senate for Bennington County. 2 minutes is very quick.
Goes by quickly. Seth Bongartz.
Good evening, everybody. I've dedicated my entire adult life to public service, from serving on the rescue squad to the zoning board as town moderator, chair of the Burton board for 15 years, to chairing the board of the North Shire Land Trust, to 5 terms in the legislature. I've been involved virtually every day since my early 20s. In my recent 4 years in the House, I've been a driving force for getting low and moderate income housing built. I'm also a recognized leader for the protection of our environment, be it streams, lakes or forests, regulatory reform, or making Act 250 work better. I'm deeply proud of the role I've been able to play in these last 4 years. I have been effective because I do not seek publicity or otherwise self-promote. I simply do the work. For the previous 3 summers, each summer I've pulled together diverse groups of people and put together 3 comprehensive bills, all of which involve both housing and environmental protection. They are now law. We have a number of issues facing us, from preparing for more 100-year floods, which, by the way, now come annually, to continuing to work on housing, to creating vibrant downtowns, to tackling the out-of-control costs of healthcare, to building a culture of tolerance, as opposed to the intolerance advocated by a couple of candidates with us tonight. COVID exposed the inherent weaknesses of our school funding system. The result is double-digit increases in property taxes that people can't afford to pay. We need to blow that system up and start from scratch, and I believe that's going to happen. The next 2 years are going to require thoughtful leadership. That's why I'm running with Rob Plunkett and why we hope you will vote for us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Seth. Cynthia Browning, you're next.
How does it come out? All right, whatever.
I'm Cynthia Browning. I'm running as an independent for one of the 2 state Senate seats for the Bennington district. I'm an economist and a former legislator. I am running specifically because education property taxes are too high and housing is too costly. We can do better than this. We need to reform the education finance system, and we need more housing, and we need to redesign housing support programs so that they are more effective and equitable. I served on House Ways and Means. The House tried repeatedly to improve the education finance system, and the Senate always shot it down. Someone has to be in the Senate with a deep knowledge of that system and the ability to think creatively about it. Just an example, one of the many problems in the system is that although the state puts a lot of money into the education fund, along with your property taxes, it uses some of that money for non-education programs. That's wrong. I think it even violates the founding legislation that set up the education fund. It has to stop. It amounts to over $200 million, that's 20 cents on your property tax rate. So I know that because I served on Ways and Means. I don't know what will come out of the commission that's studying it, but you need senators in there who aren't going to be dependent on what so-called experts tell them about it, who aren't going to be dependent on what leadership tells them about it, who have an independent understanding of that system. We need more housing, but we also need to have a better use of our existing housing stock. We need to be sure that we are encouraging more dense use of housing, larger household sizes, encouraging long-term rentals, not short-term rentals. So there are many, many problems facing us. I feel that my experience as a legislator and my analytical understanding as an economist will help me to address those problems. I'm running as an independent because I think that sometimes party politics and ideologies are getting in the way of solutions to our problems.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. Steve Berry, you're next.
Steve Berry. I served in the legislature when Cynthia was there, and she was one of the smartest persons in the legislature and did a fabulous job. Often not listened to because she articulated things that people didn't want to hear. That said, I received some wise advice from a person a long time ago, and he said, if you want to be seen, stand up. If you want to be heard, speak up. If you want to be loved, sit down and shut up. No, so I'm just going to tell you that the reason why I'm running as an independent candidate, and I was a Democrat, but I found that the lane is very small. So I've just expanded the lane. All the lanes for the R's and D's are very small lanes, and mine is much larger. So I'm running as an advocate and a voice for those who are generally voiceless. Many of them physically sick and mentally exhausted. That's the group that I work with on a daily basis. I also believe that our country is under attack from within as well as without, manipulated by powerful forces, and I think that some people don't even understand the degree to which that's happening, many of them in the legislature. I'm running in Vermont because I believe that Vermont's a petri dish for outside influencers who wish to erode our freedoms and destroy our unity and those things that we hold dear in this brave little state. I'm running because I have a wife and children and grandchildren, and I want to have a healthy Vermont that they can afford to live in. Finally, I'm running because I have a plan on how to rescue Vermont and restore our core values of faith, freedom, and fellowship. Faith in a higher power and in each other. Freedom to make our best well-informed choices, and fellowship in living life community for the benefit of everybody, rich and poor, black and white, everyone.
Thank you, Steve. All right, Joe Jervis.
I'm Joe Jervis, and I'm running because Vermonters need affordability. Over the past decade, we've seen the progressive supermajority pass climate mandates irrespective of the multi-billion-dollar cost to Vermont residents and businesses. I will refocus our environmental policy on local issues like flood mitigation and forever chemicals. As others have spoken, our education system is out of control. I too support private schools and school choice, and when we look at education, we see that our funding system needs transparency. Nobody understands how the money moves. And at the same time, our student proficiency continues to decline while costs dramatically increase. Our teachers need support to ensure our students get the education needed to be productive Vermonters. This doesn't require the second highest per pupil spending in the nation, nor the bloated administrative ranks that we've got in the Vermont school system. I will focus my efforts on increasing quality while reducing costs. Rights of towns and citizens are being chipped away. The Act 250 reform transfers control from local elected officials to regional administrative bodies. Development outside of certain village centers will be significantly more difficult. We need workforce housing. We need it where in locations where services and infrastructure exist. And this is where our focus should be. And affordability is a big issue, but safety is also on voters' minds. Some towns are no longer safe to walk at night with crime and drug issues. Law enforcement needs our support. The judicial system must be fixed so that repeat offenders are not right back out repeatedly committing crimes. And we'll focus on revamping the judicial system. I pledge to support the people, not special interests. Thank you.
Perfect timing. All right, thank you, Joe, and thank you to all the candidates. Okay, so I had a couple of questions for the candidates, just to kind of get things started, and the first question goes to Rob Plunkett. He'll be our first responder, I should say, and then we're just going to go down the table. Seth will be next, and Cynthia, then Steve, then Joe, then back to Spike. So the question is, as a couple of you mentioned in your opening statements, this year we saw a sharp uptick in property tax rates, which go to help fund our public education system. What should the state do to stabilize or reduce property tax rates to keep them at an affordable level for Vermonters? Rob, get us started.
Gosh, that's a very short question for a very big problem. So in my time, my only prior office was on the school board in Bennington, MAU school board. And I saw how the budgets worked there, where we crack down, break down, find out exactly what the budget could possibly be and not be too much for what we thought the community could afford. And what I learned very quickly was that really didn't make a difference on the property taxes whatsoever. The way that the school funding in the state works, and I'm not going to go into the weeds here, that others can do it far better than I, is essentially that all of the budgets are created and then the state has to pay for it, and it's divided amongst the property values throughout the state. And fundamentally, what has to change is that property taxes should not be the education funding source, or at least not a primary one. This has been a perennial issue for almost the entirety of Vermont, where everyone always talks about how property taxes are a regressive tax, and that it is not something that actually provides us with schools that are equal or, frankly, as powerful as they should be. So the answer that I have for the long-term change of the school funding is that it should simply not be property taxes. Thank you.
Okay, this way. So, as I said in my opening statement, COVID exposed the inherent weaknesses of our school funding system as schools were forced to take on the burdens of the mental health crisis facing students, double-digit increases in the cost of health insurance, maintenance of aging buildings, inflation, and teacher burnout. But the crisis we're facing now is the result of spending decisions made by voters across Vermont. Fundamentally, under the current system, all the legislature does is set the multiplier to raise the funds voted across, by the districts all across Vermont. We were actually able to pull some levers and reduce what would have been about a 20% increase voted by Vermonters across the state in March to a still too high 13.5%. But that being said, what we need to, the existing system has far more than run its course. We need to blow the existing system up and start over. And I think it's going to be some sort of a block grant system that will then leave more decisions at the local level. But blowing up the system alone isn't going to do it. The legislature can develop the framework, and we have to, but it's going to come down to some difficult decisions at the district level from all of us, everybody in this room, and everybody watching, to some hard choices. There are three things all of us are going to have to reconcile. We all want quality and richness of opportunity that we're committed to offering students. We have to take into, that's one side of the triangle. Another side of the triangle, cost and taxes to fund that system. What do we want to pay for it? And three is convenience. How close are you to your school and how small our school is going to be. I get it, they all matter. But there's inherent tension in those three sides of the triangle. I think the new framework will be some kind of a per pupil block grant system. Then at the district level, the decisions are going to have to be made about quality, class size, number of schools, and how much we're willing to pay for them. legislature develops the framework, all of us at the local level are going to have to make some very difficult decisions.
Thank you, Seth.
So as I said in my opening, this is one of my major issues, and as I also said, I think one of the things that could be addressed immediately is that the state has to stop spending education fund money for non-education programs. So that would be a start. The Education Commission that's been set up, and I'm going to try to testify before it, really just has a lot of people who've been involved in running the existing system. So I don't know how creative and resourceful they're going to be able to be. I think the block grant idea is a good one. I don't think getting rid of property taxes is right because you only have income and sales taxes and they go up and down with the business cycle, and we have to be able to have a stable source of funding for our schools. So I think property taxes has a role to play in this. It's just the state should not be using the fund for non-education purposes. And the whole connection between your tax rate and the budget you vote should be much more direct. It is so opaque. You can decrease your spending, and if other districts in the state increase their spending, your taxes still go up. That's nuts. I understand that's part of the way it was designed, but there has to be a better way than that. So I believe that having served on Ways and Means, I have the knowledge and the expertise to be an independent voice analyzing what the commission comes up with and figuring out a way to solve this problem and get us onto a better track. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Cynthia's right, but this is a complex question. So, property tax. The education system itself is confusing and very expensive, and one wonders how it's being run. From conversations that I've had with teachers who are friends who have recently quit, not very well. Sadly, the same can be said for nurses I know who are discouraged with the health care system. The state sets the standards, and the local school boards mostly have no recourse but to accept them. When the budget comes around, local voters may be unaware what the cost will be and are still asked to vote on the budget. How many one-on-one teacher-to-student ratios are hired by a local school? How many children graduate high school and can't read? And how were they able to get a high school diploma in Vermont? And I don't know. The state has an education fund which is meant to help education, however strange it may seem. That fund is invaded to cover costs of programs like current use and property tax credits. Why? Because it should stay with education. The fund roughly represents in the neighborhood of around $200 million. Non-educational programs should be removed from the education fund, and we should do everything possible not to continue to overtax Vermonters.
I think one of the first things with education is transparency. You know, as others have talked, just the difficulty in understanding the whole education finance system and the shell game going on, particularly the new changes to pupils aren't all created equal. You get a different weighting of pupils, and that changes the budget allocated to pupils based on if they have special needs, if they have English learning issues, and so forth. So that allows schools to have budgets that other towns get to pay for. I was up in Winhall, and they're talking about their education tax averages about $200,000 a pupil. They're a sending town. The block grant is something they would look forward to not have to send that much money up to the state for other school districts. And one of the other candidates touched on the issue is we have these studies, and since 2000 we've had over 24 studies looking at education and education funding, and it's primarily looking at the funding because the special interests are all around the table. We need to get the right people around the table. We've got one candidate at this table that sits on a school board that their cost is well under $10,000 a student. What are they doing? What are other states that have similar demographics doing that have significantly lower costs than Vermont? We need to look at that and figure out where the waste is in the system. if there's corruption in the system, where the money is going. And that starts with transparency.
Okay, and Spike Whitmire.
Do we need one of those microphones? So I'm that other candidate Joe was talking about. Schools, Vermont spends, they were second in the nation in spending per student, second in the nation, okay? Over $24,000 per student, per pupil. I am all for excellent education. It's our duty to make sure our children get educated in an excellent way. But we're at the point now where Vermonters can't handle anymore, and we have to find a way to limit education spending. Whether we could change the tax system around and pay for schools a different way, but it's still going to come out of our pocket one way or another through some kind of tax. So as far as solutions go, I haven't heard a whole lot of solutions or ideas to curb education spending. But I know one thing, Vermont has the largest administration staff per student in the country, okay? We have the most administrators and the most administrative staff per students in the country. I think we spend over $150 million on our supervisory unions. I think we have 58 supervisory unions looking over 288 schools. I think that's grossly, we don't need that many supervisory unions, and we don't need that many administrations staff. So that would be the first place I would look to cut, because I think we could do that without affecting our teachers or education. But we need to look at the administration first and foremost, because I think that's an easy place to save some money. Second of all, the school budgets continue to increase every year, as everyone said here, and when the administration proposes a budget, the school board signs off on it and passes it on to the public. The state is forced to fund it, and I would say just real quickly that an option should be looked at is to limit the what administrations are allowed to propose and keep the budget at the rate of inflation from the year before, for the time being.
Okay, thank you, Spike. Hold on to the microphone because you're going to need it in just another second. So I'll go to the second question from me. And again, we drew some straws earlier, and Spike gets to be the first responder, and then we'll go down the table. Everyone will get 2 minutes each to respond to this question. Act 18, or the Affordable Heat Act, became law in May of 2023. Act 18 established a framework for the Public Utility Commission to design a clean heat standard for approval by the Vermont General Assembly in 2025. Clean heat standard is intended to be a mechanism that facilitates thermal sector greenhouse gas emissions reductions as defined in the Global Warming Solutions Act, which was passed in 2020, by creating a market incentive and programs that reduce Vermont's residential, commercial, and industrial thermal sector greenhouse gas emissions. That's a very long introduction to my basic question, which is, do you feel like this is the correct approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and accomplish other clean energy goals the state has? Spike, you have 2 minutes.
Very clearly, no, I don't think this is the right approach. Vermonters at this time can't afford such a dramatic approach to curbing this. I think we need to take this slow, steady approach, which Vermont has been, and that's why we're in one of the cleanest states in the country. We need to, going back in history, in the 1970s, Vermonters used almost 1,700 gallons per year to heat their houses. And now we're down to the point where, on average, we spend about 700 gallons of oil per year. Vermont's made a lot of progress in this area, and we need to just keep the course on that. We don't need to take a dramatic step. Act 18 is deceptive in a lot of ways. It's called Affordable Heat Act, but there's nothing affordable about it. From the estimations of the cost of it is all across the board, and to be fair, I'll say from the lowest to the highest. I've heard any estimate from slightly under $1 up to $4 a gallon that this would add to heating fuel. All Vermonters know that anything the government gets their hand in, it usually costs more, not less. So I'd be prepared for the worst there. And, you know, it's too much too fast, and Vermonters just simply can't afford it. I guarantee you if this law is passed, and the law has been passed, but if the final details of it continue, there'll be Vermonters sitting in their homes with their thermostats on 50 degrees instead of 70. And that's just not acceptable for our state.
What's not acceptable for our state is for anyone to scare people into voting for them. So a couple of weeks ago, I was going to my mailbox to get my ballot, which I thought was going to be there. Instead, I got this postcard from these guys on the end. That was absolute nonsense. And it was some of the numbers that you just heard from Mr. Whitmire. So I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to say that I agree with Mr. Whitmire. The slow and steady approach is what should happen, and that is exactly what is happening. So I'm a prosecutor. Every year I have to deal with laws that are coming down from Montpelier that are absolute garbage. Okay, they're not absolute garbage, but there's always something that is messed up that I have to fix, whether in the courtroom or the public defenders, which are very good in Bennington, know how to use. So I'm always disappointed with Montpelier. So when I read this, when I read the Affordable Heat Act, and then the report behind it, and then the other laws behind that, I saw, oh, this is exactly how we want our legislature to run. They first come up with a goal. They pass a law to determine what that is. They ask, you know, what are the ways to accomplish this goal? And then they pass a law to determine that. They have studies available, and they consider what the next step is. And we haven't gotten to the final step with the Clean Heat Standard yet. We now have what's a little bit weird with the Public Utility Commission actually writing the next law. And that law, it's going to be complex, but it's going to be interesting. And I think that we need to look at this slowly and really just not be scared of what we need to do in Vermont.
So I would say about the Clean Heat Standards, wow, a lot of misinformation out there about this one. As it turns out, what do you know? The oil industry players funding the misinformation, the Koch brothers, the Americans for Prosperity, which means burn oil until our grandchildren bake, and their climate-denying allies, are not happy about what could be a successful effort to help people escape their clutches. They're not afraid we're getting it wrong. They're afraid we're getting it right. They're worried about Vermont becoming a model. There's a big transition already happening. People who can't afford the upfront costs are switching to more price-stable, less expensive heating solutions. The legislature is trying to develop a mechanism for low and moderate income Vermonters who can't afford the upfront costs to also be able to make that switch. Here's the bottom line. The legislature set up a possible path about how to do it, how we could do it. Then we set up a comprehensive test of that plan through the potential study. Will it work? That's what's even going on now. Will it work? What will it cost? What do we have the workforce? We even did something the legislature has never done before. We said that we need to legislatively approve the rules for implementation established by the Public Utility Commission. With that all this information together, the legislature now almost goes back to square one. A new bill will be introduced. The bill will wind its way through 6 committees with extensive analysis and testimony about short, mid, and long-term costs and savings. Whatever gets introduced, it's not going to be what comes out at the end of the process. Maybe it will be scrapped altogether, or replaced with a different approach, or slowed way down, or maybe we'll determine that, relatively speaking, the legislature had it right with that which had stood up for testing. That's what the process is designed to figure out. And by the way, nobody's going to vote for a 70-cent increase in fuel costs for low and moderate income Vermonters. That would be exactly the opposite of what the legislature is trying to achieve. What was set up was a careful, deliberative process designed so that we can ensure we get it right. The hysteria is disingenuous, and it's largely funded by the big oil companies. They're trying to say black is white. Don't fall for it.
So I think this is another area where my training as an economist and my experience as a legislator would stand me in good stead, and it would stand you in good stead, because I will be able to read the reports and analyze them and understand them at a level that perhaps others might not. Not that I'm smarter, but just that I have specialized training. I don't know if any of you remember when Green Mountain Power took over Central Vermont Public Service. The ratepayers had bailed out CVPS, and it was in the deal that if CVPS ever got bought, the ratepayers would be paid back, and CVPS refused to do that. And I fought in the legislature to try to get that money for the ratepayers. I failed, but it shows that I'm not afraid to go up against any utility, against my own party leadership, to do what's right for Vermonters. I would be very interested to evaluate the clean heat standard that they are proposing and to see how it would work. I'm mostly in favor of a gradual, balanced approach, focusing on efficiency, renewables, insulation, things like that. I think it's important to realize that Vermont's emissions are already very low, and we don't want to distort the economy or make people's lives more difficult seeking some kind of perfection. But this is the most important environmental protection of our time, and we have to keep making progress on it. And I'm sure that we can come up with a way to do that. And I would be happy to help to construct that path.
I think that people from outside the country are very happy that Vermont is taking this on as a major issue because globalists love pushing the buttons for everybody around the entire country and around the world right now. And so it trickles down from way up where we don't even know, all the way down to us, and this is what we get. I will point out that we have $13.87, which is the minimum wage in the state of Vermont. It costs us $23.34 to work per hour. In other words, to live in Vermont, you have to make $23, and you're only making $13. So add in all of the taxes that you begin to get, and I can tell you right now, the people I deal with who are ill, who are in the hospital right now, are not going to be able to afford their fuel this fall and this winter. And these are people that I know, that I can name, people who are going to have to pay their health, they're going to have to also pay their food, they have to pay their utilities, they have to pay all of those things, and now they're going to get another tax. I just think that this is way out of control. I think that we haven't even done the work that we needed to do, due diligence-wise, when we talked over a decade and a half ago about weatherizing homes. Why don't we weatherize? And that's a great way to cut fuel costs. But we're not doing it. We're not weatherizing our homes. We're not weatherizing our businesses. That has sort of dried up, and now we're going to put more taxes on local residents. Maybe you can afford it, or we can afford it in Manchester, but you can't afford it in Rupert. There's a lot of towns like Rupert in Vermont.
There were statements about misinformation, and it is extremely difficult to get the truth out there. I wrote a rebuttal to an op-ed last week, and the Manchester Journal decided to edit it and publish it without my permission, as if it was my op-ed. They've since corrected that, but we've got the news playing in the misinformation here as well. Rob talked about there being goals set with this. That is not true. With the Global Warming Solutions Act, there were specific mandates that need to be met, and if those mandates aren't met, the state gets sued. So when we try and say that we just got to do some fine-tuning on this clean heat standard, no, it's anchored with the Global Warming Solutions Act, and the Global Warming Solutions Act says we've got to reduce our thermal emissions by 40% by 2030. That's going to cost us $3.3 billion. And we can say that we don't know what the number is. We've got a good idea what the number is, and in all probability, the report that NV5 put out on September 1st saying that it's probably going to be $4 a gallon for fuel oil and $2.12 a gallon for propane. You've got to be able to do a little bit of sixth grade math. You've got to divide those figures because they give the figures in dollars per million BTUs, and you got to translate that to dollars per gallon. But that's right here in the report that the committee is looking at right now, and the Public Utilities Commission is looking at right now. Rob made the statement that sometimes our legislators provide law that is difficult to implement, and that's true. The PUC came back and said the whole financial credit market is impossible, and this should have just been an excise tax, and that's their recommendation moving forward, a direct excise tax.
All right, well, thank you, candidates. So now we move on to the round of audience questions. Your turn. We're going to try, I guess, an experiment of sorts, try and maybe loosen up the format a little bit to allow each of the candidates 1 minute to rebut. If everyone will get 2 minutes to answer the question, okay? If one of the candidates wants to, rebut something that one of you, at least they'll get 1 minute. Everyone will get 1 minute. Only one rebuttal, because we do have to keep things moving along. So, who's first? Mr. Stanton.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Question for Mr. Jarvis. And I noticed in your opening statement you did state that your plan is to represent the people, as it says in the flyer that I just recently received. But I did a little research because I don't know much about you, and I went to your Substack place or page or whatever, and you have a piece that you wrote called Trafficking and Grooming in the United States. And you cite your mother-in-law did a word search on Pride Month, and you extrapolated the DE in Pride and the MON in month to come up with the word demon. And then you state, over the decades, the grooming of children has become much more obvious.
Can I ask you to get the question?
I'm working to the question. It's important, thank you. In another example, you cited the GLSEN organization as a dangerous sexual practices for children. But this organization is actually attempting to end discrimination, harassment, and bullying of the LGBTQ students. You also cite Carrie Lake's interview with Jeff Link and Tina Peters. Tina Peters, just today, was sentenced, it's coming. She was sentenced to 9 years in prison today. My question is, if you read your words, you support and promote some of the most radical right-wing conspiracy theory QAnon people that are out there. And the question is, thank you. How can you possibly say that you are going to represent the people when you vilify large segments of our community?
Joe, 2 minutes.
If Mr. Standard read the article clearly, the question was, is there a possibility that some of these efforts are teaching our children things that shouldn't be taught? Grooming children. Is it a radical thought to think it's wrong for children to be raped? That's my radical thought. That was the intent of the article.
Any of the other candidates wish to respond to the question? Seth?
I want to say something. I need the mic.
You go, Seth.
The reality is that Joe was talking about child care centers, the purpose being to groom children for pedophilia. That's insulting to the daycare, the people who work at the Northshire Day School, the people who work at the Arlington Area Child Care Center or the Sunrise Center, who do such an amazing job educating young children and helping make it possible for their parents to work. And if we're going to try to make Vermont Vermont, in order to be successful, has to be a truly welcoming place, especially for young people. And nobody in that age group or any of us is going to tolerate or want to be part of a Vermont that says, we welcome some of you, but not others. In fact, we're going to demonize others. So if we talk about keeping young people in Vermont, attracting people to Vermont, this is headed in exactly the opposite direction to put out the unwelcome mat. Thank you.
Can I?
Anyone else wish to comment on the question?
Thank you.
Any Spike?
You know, to be clear, I've never read any of Joe's articles. I think he's been grossly misunderstood and misrepresented. But this is what I do know about Joe. I met him about 7 weeks ago, and he's a good guy. He cares for people. He loves people. Just the last week, we were walking through a senior citizens housing complex, and we were meeting people and knocking on doors. And I was doing my thing, and Joe was doing his thing. And I looked, and all of a sudden, I didn't see Joe any longer. I was like, "Where's Joe at? What's going on?" And I come to find out, I find Joe, and he's in the living room of a lady who was having breathing problems. And this senior citizen was unraveled a bit, and Joe was sitting there in the living room helping that lady feel better. Joe called an ambulance and sat there with that lady until the ambulance got there. And that's the kind of person Joe is. Joe cares about people. He's misrepresented, I think, in a lot of these articles, but he's a good guy.
Okay. Next question. Steve.
First of all, thank you, Andrew, and GNet TV. There are a lot of questions that have not been answered by the current legislature. And if they have been answered, they've been bullied to the taxpayer, and the taxpayers do not understand. It needs to be explained to them simply, in simple terms, so they can choose to vote who is appropriate. Now, by criticizing each other is not a solution for these taxpayers. Seth, you can criticize Joe. Anybody can criticize whoever. But you were up there and you voted to raise taxes. That's what the taxpayer is concerned about. Why aren't you? And that's my question.
So, actually, here it is. This is an interesting question because in a way you're asking the question about affordability. And so we've already talked about the school taxes and the fact that the system is broken, has been for 30 years, and that system needs to be changed. But the word affordability is not as simple as it sounds. One approach is to simply say no to taxes of any kind under any circumstances. That's the approach the governor has taken. I get it. But that approach can actually drive up costs. You don't save money by not fixing a leaky roof. Let me give you two examples. The legislature passed a small increase in the payroll tax to produce a systemic fix to the child care system that was on the verge of collapse due to lack of funding. That would have been a financial disaster for Vermont if for no reason other, and there are others, but then a whole lot of the workforce would have had to drop out or stay home just to take care of their children. We fixed that system. We now, the daycare centers can afford to pay their workers. They don't have to charge so much that people can't afford to come, and we saved that system from collapse. The other was fees for the transportation fund. The governor is supposed to introduce a fee bill every 2 years for incremental adjustment to agencies funded by fees to at least keep up with inflation. For whatever reason, he's refused to do so. The result is that the transportation fund was being starved, And we were hollowing out the agency and leaving federal money on the table, for roads because we didn't keep up with the cost of inflation with fees is crazy. We did the responsible thing and raised fees to where they should have been had we had the usual every 2-year incremental increase. Both of these bills and both of these actions by us actually save us money in the long run. As we've discussed, school funding was the opposite, is its own issue, and we've actually, in those instances, we did raise taxes, but it's like fixing a leaky roof, and we actually save Vermont money in the long run.
So what else, Cynthia?
So I think that the Vermont state tax system is rife with inefficiency and inequities. And there are a lot of places where we could streamline it and make it simpler and make it clearer to people what's happening to their money and why they're paying the taxes they are. And I think that I could make a contribution to that because of my experience on Ways and Means and as an economist. I also think it would be important for my voice to be there because I am running as an independent, and I have shown in the past that I'm willing to speak truth to power, that I'm willing to go against my own party, that I'm willing to do what I think is right for Vermonters and for my district and what I see as right. Solutions to our problems are not going to come from wishful thinking and political rhetoric. They're going to come from hard analysis, understanding of the fact, creative thinking, and getting together in the center. The center is the strongest place. And I like to think that's where I'm sitting.
The affordability issue is a big issue because a regular Vermonter brings in less than $7,500 to what they need to live. Now, a couple of years ago, there was a really great idea that we bring the minimum wage up from, what was it, $12 or maybe less, $10? Anyway, we brought it up, and that was good. But some people said to me, well, gee, we can't afford to bring it up to $15 because that's just way too high. Well, way too high is way too low for basically living in Vermont if you're not a middle class. If you're making minimum wage. So what we have here is a failure within the system to allow for Vermonters to actually live here. And that is the reason why taxing is not beneficial at the particular time. Now maybe when that is Vermonters have a livable wage at $23 an hour or higher, maybe they'd be willing to pay those taxes, and maybe those taxes would then be effective for the entire state. In the meantime, people are discouraged because they can't live here. And I'm talking about generation after generation of generation Vermonters who can't afford heat pumps. They can't afford Efficiency Vermont help. I can. I'm really blessed by that. But there's so many people who will never benefit from the amount of meager money that they have. And that's the issue that I'm really concerned about when I see taxes. And I voted for some of these taxes. And I lost when I went to run again. And maybe that was a good reason, because I wasn't thinking well enough about the people who couldn't normally afford what I could afford.
I think a lot of this fundamentally comes down to a big government model or a small government model. When you look at Vermont versus our neighbor in New Hampshire, their population is bigger, but their overall state spending is roughly half of Vermont's spending. Why is that? What is the government doing that the government shouldn't be doing? And if we address that question, I think we can find a whole lot more affordability for Vermonters.
Can I have a microphone too?
Oh, I feel that we have that.
Thank you. To lower taxes, we have to lower spending. Okay, that's obvious, but it doesn't seem to be. I talked to someone just last week, and this is how bad it's gotten. He said that he'd worked here his whole life. He was a plumber, worked his whole life, owns his home, and he was looking at his budget for when he retires, and if the tax spending continues at the rate it is, he says, I came to the conclusion that I cannot live in Vermont when I retire. He says, I want to live in Vermont, but I am going to have to move. And I thought to myself, that is just so unacceptable that hardworking Vermonters have been here their whole life, that want to stay. They're not leaving because they want to, they're leaving because they have to. State spending is up 38% since 2020. 38%. Education spending, like we've talked about, is up almost 14% this year, probably another 10% next year when he comes out. There's many on this stage that's had a chance to do something about this spending, and not one thing has happened yet. So I would just give, recommend you think about that.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just wanted to clarify the question. It sounded like you were just saying you don't like taxes instead voted to increase them. Was there a particular one that you were questioning?
There were 8 bills that were in the legislature that were overridden by the Democratic majority.
I just wanted to clarify, was there a particular tax?
No, all of them.
So every tax?
Yeah.
And then
I mean, the DMV that was just mentioned,
Thanks,
the
Steve.
DMV
Thank you,
didn't
Steve.
even request the tax
Steve.
for the legislature.
Steve.
What?
We got to keep going. Yes, sir.
I have a very specific question about the tax, actually. I read the bill for the childcare, and in it, there was 13 new positions created and a new department, as well as $1 million allocated to a consultant, unnamed. I'm a consultant, so I mean, I understand, consultants need to get paid. But can you just explain, like, I agree, it's like a death by a million cuts with all the different taxes, and it impacts everyone. That's a payroll tax that comes straight out of your W-2. I just looked it up to see what mine was. So 13 new positions, $1 million a year for a consultant. That goes to what Spike was saying, just this bloated administrative state. Can you please explain why we needed that?
I will confess, I can't remember, because it was a few years ago that happened, at least 2 years ago. I can't remember the details of those 13 positions, but the vast majority of the money goes to centers. And I have been talking to the people who run the child care centers in Bennington County, and they have all said the change has been a godsend. I understand your question. I don't.
Why not give those people, why not give the people who need that money just a voucher? Why does it have to be administered by some organization, like some administration up there? Just give those people a tax credit or a voucher so they can make the decision themselves and not let the state decide who gets it. That's my only point.
The state doesn't decide. The state doesn't decide who gets it. They all get it, and they all get it according to a formula per child, and however how many children are there. And so what it has done is it has made it possible to pay something close to a living wage for the people who work in child care centers, who are some of the most important people in Vermont, doing amazing work with early education. 4 years ago, Kathleen James and I met with the then board chair of the North Shire Day School, and she said to us, she was basically in tears, saying, we are about to have to close one of the oldest, most successful child care centers in Vermont. We passed this legislation because we finally had to do a systemic fix to it. And we did a systemic fix that has now put child care centers on a path to financial stability, and that is a critical piece of Vermont's economy cannot run on all 8 cylinders without having successful child care centers. We need more of them, not fewer. We put the pieces in place for that to happen, and they are all telling us this has been a godsend and it's a game changer and they are able to stay afloat and able to do the critical work they do for early childhood education and the critical work they do, making all of us who have children feel safe leaving them there and going to work. And without it, we are in big trouble.
Anyone else on the panel care to respond to the question? Okay, you, sir, I believe you had your hand up there.
Thanks. My question is related to an interview with a representative that was interviewed last week, an 8-year rep, who kind of talked about how the legislature's leadership makes all the decisions before the session even starts as to what will be discussed and what will be debated in advance. He's been there 8 years, and his contention is that these decisions are kind of made and it's not very democratic in his view. And, you know, in light of recent, you know, discussions about the freedom of speech going away, the First Amendment, the Constitution maybe not being needed anymore. The New York Times said that a couple weeks ago, and the New Yorker, and John Kerry's talking about freedom of speech going away. My question is really to anybody who's been in the legislature, I guess the folks in the middle, you know, and in regard to Vermont's town meeting and having open discussions and really hashing out solutions with multiple voices. What is your take on that rep's point of view that it's no longer really very democratic here in our state house, and the supermajority is running away with all the decisions from the outset?
Cynthia?
So I've served in the House of Representatives in Vermont for 12 years, so I haven't been there for 4 years. In my experience, there is a lot of agenda setting for both parties from the top, and it's really hard to dislodge them from those agendas. Now, everybody in the legislature, I believe, has good intentions and they want to do good things as they define them, and we may all define them differently. The thing that I think is unfortunate is when, and I think this was true of both parties in my experience, they advocate for their positions and they use facts selectively, and it distorts things by omission, if not by commission, because you can use different numbers to say things. And if you have another voice, it can be very hard to get it across. And the party system, this is a necessity if you have some sort of a legislative process. You know, if you decide to do something, you have to work together to get it done, and you have to follow in line, and you have to vote the way they want you to vote, or you have to bear the consequences, and you will have consequences. You will be punished if you do not do what party leadership tells you to do. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running as an independent, because I don't want to even, I mean, I actually did what I wanted anyway, but I got punished, and I don't think that was right. And I did not give up. I was told not to say certain things and only to say things in certain contexts, and I was like, I did not give up my free speech rights when I came into this house, and I'm going to say what I think is best for my constituents whenever I think it's necessary, and I did. So I think that's entirely possible. I think freedom of speech is alive and well in Vermont, but I find people need to take responsibility for what you say. You have the right to speak, but you need to take responsibility for having a factual basis for what you're saying, and I find that that's sometimes lacking.
I question the freedom of speech is alive and well, because I don't think that people are paying attention on the local level on how much they need to engage and become really involved in what's going on. And so that's left up to other people to make the decisions. And when other people make the decisions, maybe you have been left out because your voice has never been heard. I could give you an example. Before I ran for office, and the reason the impetus was for running for office was this. I got a call on one night, cold winter night in February, from a young man and said, would you help us get before the legislation some, some talking points about reversing Citizens United? Well, that's a free speech issue. Corporations had gotten the same rights for speech as we have. And I said, sure. And I called up Dick Sears, and I met with Dick Sears and Jeff Wilson and Bob Hartwell, and lo and behold, something that didn't happen in the Senate or the General Assembly, within 2 months, something did happen. Those people talked and they listened, and the next thing you knew, it came up for a vote. Vermont became the first state to call for reversal of Citizens United. That's what one person can do. That's the only reason why I ran for office. And the reason why you need to have your voices heard is because otherwise you can live in a vacuum, in a little bubble up there under the dome. And my chairperson said to me in Human Services, you should not go and listen to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when he comes to speak. And I said, why? He said, because he's an anti-vaxxer. And I said, he's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's an environmentalist. I don't know anything about anti-vaxxers. He said, oh, you should not go and hear him. You shouldn't go and hear him. That's ridiculous.
So, Steve, I'll take that. Yeah. So, just want to say a couple things about, going back to your question. The parties caucus, and the parties come up with their priorities, like the whole group of legislators. And so I have been to the Democratic caucuses, and the Republicans do the same thing. And we've developed the list of things that we're going to try to get, that we think have to try to get done over the course of the year. And there is an inherent tension between some level of party discipline, because without some level of discipline, nothing's going to get done. You're going to have 150, if you're in the House, chiefs running around trying to, so there's a tension there. And my experience is that if you work hard, and I have been a very effective legislator, if you work hard, you gain respect, and because people respect the fact that you work hard, if you're knowledgeable, and I have never felt any of that like anybody's telling me what to do. I have driven, and I've really helped drive an agenda on housing, on the environment, and I've worked with people across the aisle and within my party, and I've never felt that kind of like anybody's telling me what to do, and decisions are made by only a few people. I don't think that's true.
Right. That's probably true because he's in the majority there. 38% increase, I've said this before, in spending since 2020. In my opening statement, I said party politics and political agendas only hurt the people, right? And your question was a perfect example of that. That's why we need transparency in the government. As Cynthia was saying, people need a voice, and when people know what's going on, and when people have a voice and have legislators that listen to them, and we know what's going on, they can rise up with a loud voice and push political agendas off the table. That's why they need transparency in government.
Just a clarification, that was a Democratic representative that was interviewed.
Thank you for clarifying that. Obviously, I'm not in the legislature. And as a lawyer, it's very difficult for me to sit up here and not object when they're answering the question that's not asked. But to your point, it sounds like what you were hearing from that particular person is that that person wasn't able to have the sort of interrelationships with others there where they could get something done. And what it immediately made me think about it is simply my job, and I'm going to go off topic here, is that I'm a prosecutor, and I prosecute crimes, and what I do really is negotiate. I go to someone who's diametrically opposed to my position, and we work it out, and that's probably 99% of my job. And having that sort of skill, and whether it's in the party system itself, in the caucus, or if it's out in the hallways, I think that's an important thing. And it might be that whoever you talk to, I don't know who it was simply not able to have that sort of interaction with people. And I've developed that over 17 years, so I think that I can at least bring that to something within the Senate to make it so that that sort of thing at least doesn't affect me. But I'll see if it is affecting those around me as well.
Mr. Jarvis?
I think the key thing here is with the current supermajority, it's difficult to have discussions outside that agenda of the supermajority. I have a number of friends that are current senators in the Republican caucus, and they're like, Joe, if you get it up here, it's going to be very difficult because our job is probably just going to be sitting there to help the governor's vetoes stay in place. Right now, the legislature is extremely out of balance, and Vermonters need to fix that.
Let's go to the back of the room. Way over there. Yes, you. No, the person behind you. You. No.
My question is about the 6 people sitting at this table. The question is to Seth mainly. I would like to know what he's going to do about the 541 people that have come across the border that shouldn't be here. And also what he's going to do about the people that are dying of fentanyl. I think it's somewhere between 20 and 40 people. I had one of my friends recently die. His father was a friend of mine for many years, and when the boy died, a friend of mine said he had 4 hits, meaning that he almost died 4 times, and on the 5th time he went down. He looked like the saddest man, and I want to know what Seth is going to do to try to fix this problem, because no one ever talks about this in Manchester. We also have a shortage of policemen here.
Okay, the question is, sir.
3 questions.
Excuse me for
To do
interrupting, but your
shifts,
question
what is he going to
is,
do about the fentanyl, and also what is he going to do about the 541 people that have crossed the border this year so far? Thank you, Seth. You can answer that. And not read it off the paper. Answer from the heart.
You know, that's actually what I'm going to do, because, number one, I'll get to the heart in a minute. The border is a federal issue. There's not much the Vermont legislature can do about that. That's a federal issue. Fentanyl is, everybody in this room, I suspect, in one way or another, has been impacted by the drug crisis. And I have had children of very close friends, good kids, die of probably fentanyl, drug overdose. I understand.
sir, let him answer the question.
It's not, there's no simple fix to this. It is that kind, the drug addiction, it's connected to homelessness, it's connected to poverty, it's connected to lack of training and jobs, and to our lack of a completely coherent mental health system, and we need to work on all of those. I have actually focused, I will say, I have put most of my focus on housing and trying to get housing built for Vermonters and make it easier for them to have a place to live. That's a piece of the puzzle, but it is work. It's the way it's always been. It's going to be little bits at a time, and it's about trying to improve lives so that people don't go into that kind of despair in the first place. And that's really what I don't have a complete answer for that. I wish I did. It's something that is heartbreaking for me and everybody in this room.
Okay.
I just want to say, as a former member of the legislature, it is important to know that any individual legislator is not going to be able to solve those problems. So I think that was a little bit unfair on Seth to say, what are you going to do to solve this? First of all, and my heart goes out to you and the family of the person who lost their lives. My understanding is the rate of overdose deaths in Vermont has actually come down. We don't know if that will last or not. And part of it is the available of Noxolone, the Narcan, the treatment to deal with the overdoses and help people survive. And I think we are trying to provide more treatment. We have a long way to go on that. We have to keep working on it. I think that one of the parts of legislating that is not well known is oversight. How are the programs working? How are the agents working? What's not working? What needs more resources? What needs less? You don't get headlines from that. That's why legislators don't do enough of it. So we have to have more oversight on those programs. And I agree the border is federal, but there are aspects of our law enforcement that are involved in that state security, and we need to have support for them and oversight of that. So I think it's not sexy, it's not high publicity, but oversight, making sure that money is well spent, making sure that jobs are getting done, day after day after day, and then gradually, maybe you make a difference. And that's not the kind of solution that we would like to hear. But I think that's the way such complex problems get solved.
That's a great answer. Anyone else care to?
Right back to you in a minute, Rob. You know, I think part of this question is what's going on with law enforcement in the state. We had a major drug bust down in Bennington last week. 5 people were arrested. 3 were back out on the streets the next day. Is that solving the problem? I think we've got some problems with the criminal justice system that need to be looked at.
Who is the criminal justice system?
Sir,
Still haven't answered
sir,
the question.
sir, please, let me answer the question.
So, you know, our judicial system, our courts, our prosecutors, we're seeing criminals right back out on the street. I did an interview last week, and the host of the interview, she had worked in the prison systems for a while, and for 10 years, and in that time never found a drug dealer in there, in all the people she interacted with. Why are the drug dealers not serving time? That's a question we've got to answer.
Anyone else? Oh, Rob.
So, I know how Seth's gonna help, at least the fentanyl problem. He asked me to run. So I'm a prosecutor. I've been banging my head against the wall about drugs for 17 years. And fentanyl, there's quite frankly no more heroin anymore. It's all fentanyl. And Cynthia's right. Our state did do a good job in bringing down overdose deaths. It was from Narcan. That's a Band-Aid. And I can tell you, drug addiction has not gone down. And there are 2 specific things that can be done. 1, methadone clinic close to home, within walking distance. Our family members have to go. This guy's saying no. If you don't want it in your backyard, you already have these folks in your backyard. The addicts are already in your backyard. They need our help. And it's a public health issue. The second thing is we need sober living spaces. We need to have a space where it's not just expensive inpatient treatment, it's what happens afterwards. I had a guy just the other day, he went to jail. He got clean in jail. He came out, was still clean, but he was back in court saying, I should have never gotten clean, my life was better when he was high. And that's because he didn't have somewhere to go. It's because he didn't have the supports afterwards. And so those are 2 things that are directly something that can help bring down the fentanyl problem, is bringing down the demand. More generally is community outreach. Going out there and seeing people in their homes and making sure that you know that you're compassionate, but also making sure you're going to hold them accountable for when they fail. And there's a lot more that I can talk about with this, but that's going to go off right now.
So, you know, let's keep it simple. Our state just spent $825,000 to hire staff to implement Act 18 this year. That hasn't even started yet. Why not put $825,000 into hiring some more police officers? Our police officers are our first defense in defending and keeping the fentanyl out of here. The things Rob said were good. We need to treat the symptoms, but we need to treat the problem, and the problem is keeping it out of Vermont. And the only way to do that is to increase our police force, support our police force, and give them what they need so they can protect and keep us safe. And the other, what happened to the other microphone?
It's the one they're using.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, yeah.
I have a question.
You've had your, sir, you may have an opportunity after we're done.
I think it was Mr. Bongartz who said some time ago the whole education financing system needs to be jettisoned. It's not working. That was music to my ears. And I'd like to know a little bit more about how that could be replaced and whether or not you think that it's feasible to accomplish that in the legislature. Thank you.
Thanks, I'm glad you asked that question. I do think it's feasible. I actually think it's going to happen. I think we've reached the point of crisis, and once in a while when you reach the point of crisis, the legislature acts. I think, though, as I mentioned, the block grant, and I can see this, that there's so much nuance to this, and so I can only do a very high level here, but it would be a combination of the non-primary residential property tax, a primary residential tax set at a very low affordable rate, and then getting, like Cynthia said, get some things out of the system that shouldn't be there. And I'll use mental health as a great example. Mental health is really a societal issue. It's being forced onto the schools, and they're having to spend a lot of money and a lot of time dealing with students' mental health and paying for it out of the property tax system. And we should take that out, and I think that's really in part what Cynthia was talking about. That, for instance, should be taken out and paid for through the general fund and administered and brought into the schools differently. But I think the fundamental piece on the spending side is a block grant, per pupil block grant, and then with the ability for towns to raise more, possibly through the income tax rather than the property tax, in order to keep primary property taxes very low. But that is going to, like I said, the legislature can develop that framework, and it can make it be paid for through, at least somebody will be in charge then, by the way. The legislature will at least be setting the rate for what's going to raise that money for the block grant. Right now, in a way, it's an amazing Rube Goldberg system where nobody's in charge. And we need to have a system where somebody's in charge. So the legislature would be in charge, at least to the extent of setting the block grant rate. And then communities within that then are going to have to make some have some real discussions and make some difficult decisions about how they want to spend that money. And they want to spend it on a lot of small schools, or they want to consolidate, what do they want to do? But that's going to be a decision at the local level.
Anyone else care to?
That's, I think that we do have this commission studying this, and they may come up with some things, but I think what Seth has outlined, the possible block grant and getting non-education expenses out of the ed fund, and some combination of a property tax that's lower than the current ones, and other sources of funding, whether it's an income tax. I still have a lot of questions about income taxes being set based on voted budgets. I don't see how that's going to work. So I think that we need to look at what they come up with, but again, I would say how important it is to have someone in the Senate who understands this system and will be able to analyze the suggestions and whether they will work or whether they will create unintended side effects. Because this has happened over and over and over again. The legislature does such and such because they think it's going to do X, and it may do X, but it also does Y, and you didn't want that. So we need people in the Senate in particular who can analyze the proposals and figure out what's going to work and not work and understand the complexity of the interactions. And then maybe we can create a system that has clear, transparent accountability for the state, for the school boards, for the voters, for the schools, everybody. And it may not be pleasant and it may not be easy, but at least we'll understand what we're doing. And that would be really good, because I think many people don't understand the system, and that's wrong. It's just wrong. And I would like to work to fix that.
Spike.
Spike?
just real briefly, this issue is crushing everyday Vermonters. This is a big problem, and I keep hearing the word should and could in a lot of responses here on the stage. And, it's not time for should and coulds anymore. We have to do something. I already proposed a simple fix to this. I would immediately look to cut the administrations and the supervisory unions in our state. Could save potentially $75 million right off the top. Very simple fix. But overall, to Cynthia's point, we need leaders that will make tough decisions and bring about change. And there's many on the stage that's had a chance to do that. And here we are, again, 38% increase in spending over the last 4 years, almost 14% increase in school funding last year alone, probably 10 to 12% next year. The time for could and shoulds are done. We need people that will actually do something about it.
Anyone else? Hold on. Young lady over there. Yes, you.
My name is Addison Greenland, and I'm a local student here at Burton, and we've been learning about government, and we've also been talking about some common sense gun laws. So if any of you were to be elected, would you be for or against implementing some common sense gun laws?
Sounds like that question goes to the entire panel, so.
I suppose I've got the microphone in my hand, and I'm glad this question came up because we're in Vermont, and what I have seen over the past few years has just broken my heart. Because growing up, I wasn't a hunter. Folks in my family were, and we knew about guns. We knew about gun safety. We knew how to respect firearms and how to use them. It was our culture. It was something that this means something to us, and we're going to respect it. And that has dwindled so much in at least the past 10 years. And this is especially what I've been seeing in our drug cases. Where folks that they grew up, their family is a family of hunters, and then one of those kids becomes addicted, and then all of those guns then become part of the trade. And so when I started as a prosecutor, it was essentially one gun law. You couldn't have a loaded long rifle in your car. And now I think we have 3 or 4 of them that are specifically related to guns. And I'm surprised to say this, but I will be in support of other gun laws, such as banning assault rifles. I would never have guessed that I was going to ever say that when I was growing up, but yes, that's my position on that.
Who else would like to respond, if anyone?
I'll just you go first. No, you go ahead. Okay. I'll just say that I will defend people's right to hunt to my last breath in the legislature. It's a Vermont tradition. I grew up with it. All my friends grew up with it, and it's sort of like what Rob was saying. But I will say that now we have the strictures of U.S. Supreme Court that has basically made it very difficult. They basically just said anything goes. That's pretty scary. It's pretty sad. But if we could do it, I would ban assault rifles and armor-piercing bullets and that kind of stuff in a minute. They have no purpose other than to kill people. And for us just to be flooding the streets in the country with assault rifles and is just insane, frankly. But unfortunately, we're stuck with some of that because of the U.S. Supreme Court. But so on the one hand, I'll defend hunting with appropriate guns for that purpose. But I'm not in favor of just having a flood of the insanity that we have now with a total lack of control of guns.
I think common sense gun laws is probably one of those things that's in the eye of the beholder. But I'm very proud to have voted for some of the gun laws that Governor Scott signed into law that were to my mind, focused on trying to be sure that people who should not have guns, even if it's only temporarily, don't have access to them. So that criminals don't have guns, that people who are having a mental health crisis may not have access to their guns temporarily, that people who may be a danger to other people may not have access. Because community safety, you know, we always have this balance of rights and responsibility. If you're gonna assert the right to bear arms, you have to be responsible in how you execute it. So I think that in Vermont, we've tried to balance that by looking at cases where someone may not be able to be responsible, and then we put restrictions on their access to guns. And I think that's the approach we need to take, and the question is, where do you make that balance? And what, as Seth says, what does the state really have the ability to do, given the federal context? But I also think, again, oversight, enforcement of existing laws, you know, supporting law enforcement in that enforcement, and also, as communities, trying to support responsible gun ownership and responsible gun use, and making it unacceptable, intolerable to engage in any kind of violent acts with them. That's what I think is what we need to build on.
Anyone else wants to? Okay. I think we have time for one last question.
Can I respond to that?
From the audience.
Andrew, Spike wants to.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah. I didn't get your name, but, you know, the gun issue is one of those things that, you know, there's people on both sides of this here, you know, and feel passionately about it, and I get that. As Rob well knows, it's a Second Amendment right. Unfortunately, if you feel that guns are dangerous, it is still a Second Amendment right. It is what it is, you know, it's in our Constitution. I personally think that it's not the gun that's necessarily the issue. Always, it's the mental, you know, the mental health of the person that's pulling the trigger. And I think, you know, our efforts, if we want to solve this problem, isn't to take guns and attack, you know, pull guns off the streets. And I mean, obviously, if they're criminals, they shouldn't be having them. But we don't need to take guns out of people's homes. We need to increase our mental health care. And Vermont is way behind on mental health care. It's a terrible issue. I've worked in the soup kitchen for 25 years, and there's a majority of the people that come in there in the position they are because of a mental state. And there's just not the resources, there's not the help and to help those people. And if we want to really fix this issue, we need to really support mental health care in Vermont.
And Andrew, I'm going to take my 1 minute rebuttal on that. It's going to be just a couple of seconds, though. I just want to make it clear that people with mental illness are not more likely to be violent than any of the rest of us.
I didn't mean it. I didn't say that. That's not good. No.
Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. Real short question, tightly framed. Tom. No speeches, please.
No, I'll just briefly introduce myself. Good evening, my name is Thomas West. I do serve on the Manchester Planning Commission. While my husband, who sits on the Manchester Select Board, and our 4 children aren't here with me tonight, they are at the core of why I am. One of the candidates recently equated Pride Month to demons, so this is a yes or no question to all 6 of the candidates. Do you equate Pride Month, and by extension, my family, to something harmful or demonic?
Yes or no?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think that's what makes Vermont really special. Is in general, Vermont's a place that tolerates everyone and allows them to live the lifestyle and the beliefs that they want to. You know, whether it's an LGBTQ, that, you know, if you live that way, okay, Vermonters in general just say, okay, you do your thing over there. And if you're into religion and, you know, religious people, you go over there, you do your thing, and we'll leave you alone. And whether it's, you know, whatever it is, Vermont's been very tolerant to that, and I don't think by any means, you know, we should discriminate in that sense.
I guess we're going to answer more than just yes or no, but absolutely not. And I'm glad you asked it in that way, because when I got involved with this, one of the main reasons was when I heard that Jervis was in Washington DC on January 6th. So I'm like, okay, no way, I'm gonna run. And then I learned later it was much worse. All right, okay.
Steve?
Everyone that wants to shout me down when I'm saying that I'm not a bigot, fine, go ahead.
Excuse me. Ma'am, let him answer the question.
Yes.
But quite frankly, demonizing my loved ones was something that hurt very, very deeply. And I have been to different Pride celebrations, and I've been proud there.
It's despicable. And the answer is no. And the answer is the absolute opposite. We don't need to be tolerant. We need to be welcoming. And we need to make clear to everybody, no matter who they are, whether they're different or God knows what, that they are welcome in Vermont. Not who you are and whether you are gay or whatever you are is irrelevant. It's irrelevant to young people, the kind of people we're trying to attract. It's irrelevant to me. I want Vermont to be a welcoming place, and the only way for Vermont to be successful is to be a truly welcoming place.
Does that include the minor attracted persons camp?
Excuse me.
I have that garbage.
To answer your question, absolutely not. I believe that a spirit of tolerance and generosity is very important, and also protecting people who are vulnerable. And I would just say that when I was a justice of the peace, I did do same-sex marriages and was able to send people out onto a journey that years ago they would not have been able to take, and it was very satisfying.
No.
No. Irrespective of the article was pointing out there are fringes everywhere. And like the question about, does that tolerance extend to minor attracted people? I've got a son that's homosexual. We love him. You know, I am welcoming, but we have to call out where evil is being done. And that's it.
I'm sorry for all of you who've had their hands up. We are going to have to move on to our closing statements. You may have an opportunity to ask the questions to the candidates when we break up. Let's go to 1 minute long closing statements from everyone. And let's see. Joe, I believe we'll start with you and work down the table that way. Did I get it right this time? You did. Yay. All right.
So in closing, I'm going to start with Article 18 of the Vermont Constitution because I think it's very critical for this election of your senators. It states that frequent recurrence to fundamental principles and firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, industry, and frugality are absolutely necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty and keep government free. The people ought therefore pay particular attention to these points in the choice of officers and representatives, and have a right in a legal way to exact a due and constant regard to them from their legislators and magistrates in making and executing such laws as are necessary for the good government of the state. Vermonters can't afford the continuing emptying of our wallets by the progressive supermajority. We can't afford the clean heat standard and its roughly $10 billion price tag. Certainly not on top of the property taxes, the increased B&B fees, and the higher health insurance premiums, higher electric rates, and the new payroll tax coming out of all of our salaries. We need to get spending on taxing under control, and I'll be working to bring frugality to our state fiscal policy.
I want to thank Jeanette and the opportunity to be here tonight and all of the speakers. My sense is that we are losing our freedoms, and when the First Amendment is on the chopping block, as it was stated by Kamala Harris, she says free speech is a privilege, not a right. I think that we're all in jeopardy. I like the fact that everybody can have an opportunity to speak here tonight, regardless of where you come from. I think you need to strengthen your town meetings, our town meetings. I think that we need to have a referendum to make Vermont Town Meeting Day a state holiday. I think we need to use our meeting houses as wellness centers for communities and restore them, as we're doing in 1786 Rupert Meeting House. I think that we need to focus on health, and the health of our citizens runs the gamut from mental health to all other types of health. So I think that's what we need to do.
So this is really a kind of an extended job interview, because you're thinking about who to hire to represent you in Montpelier. And I would just suggest to you that it's important to have a diversity of views. It's all very well to talk about teamwork, but even on teams, different team members have different roles, different skills, different abilities. And I just want to put it before you that the skills, the knowledge, the experience that I have would serve you well, given the problems that face us. When I served in the legislature, it was the hardest thing I ever did, and the most frustrating. But it was also the most satisfying, because I knew that I was doing what I could to improve the conditions of life of my community, my neighbors, my family, the environment, the economy. And I asked nothing better than for you to send me back to Montpelier, and I'll do everything I can to justify your faith in me.
We can't go backwards. We must reject Trumpism, especially Trumpism disguised as normalcy. I think there's a consensus among Vermonters that we want good schools, vibrant downtowns, a clean environment. And by the way, you can't just say you want a clean environment. That doesn't mean anything. You have to have the courage to enact policies that actually make it happen. We want opportunity for our friends and neighbors and their children. We want a Vermont that truly welcomes all, not just those who are like us. We want sane, thoughtful governance. We want to feel safe in our homes. We want the opportunity to live successful lives. We have to fix our property tax system. We have to build housing. We have to prepare for our annual 100-year floods. And we have to keep Vermont as a beacon of democracy and not allow Trumpism, complete with its lies and hate of others. We can't let that creep into Vermont legislature. We have taken steps forward toward all of those, and we need to keep making progress.
And you might have noticed I'm not one for political speeches, but I love political discussion. So thank you all, even those that we clearly disagree. This was a good night, and this is a night we should have more often. And it seems like the folks out there, you have the choice of essentially three pairs. There's Seth and me, there's Spike and Joe, Stephen and Cynthia. I have a note for myself to not forget, and this is what I'm going to ask you to do. Go vote. You can vote now. Make sure you vote.
Quite simply, when you cast your vote this year, it won't be for a person or a party. It will be for whether you want to spend more or keep more. It won't be for whether you want to, it'll be for whether you want to support and enable our law enforcement to fight back against crime that makes us feel unsafe, or whether you want to live in fear. Be whether you want to choose to do things, like buying electric cars and installing heat pumps, or whether you want to be forced to do those things. And finally, whether or not you will want to put Vermont on a course that will put our kids and our grandkids in a position to succeed and enable them to live and enjoy Vermont like we have. So I would ask that you would consider voting for me. I'm Spike Whitmire, and I'd be honored to be your state senator.
Okay, well, my apologies to everyone who didn't get a chance to ask a question. There were several more hands up, but unfortunately the clock is ticking. So We're going to have to leave it there for tonight. I just, again, want to just thank all the candidates for being here tonight. You can also, if you didn't get enough of it tonight, you can watch it again on GNAT at our website. We also have a section with other candidate interviews up there as well. So again, thank you everyone who came tonight. Really great to have you all here. Thank you, candidates, and have a good night, everybody.